Elizabeth Strout is the author of Pulitzer Prize winning Olive Kitteridge and national bestsellers Abide With Me, Amy and Isabel, and My Name is Lucy Barton. I'm sure you all know Olive Kitteridge was made into a very popular HBO miniseries, and here finally Strout has delivered us the sequel to that story with Olive Again. I think my favorite description of the book was on the New York Times Book Review website, where the headline is, quote, "The Return of Olive Kitteridge, the tart, crotchety, beloved curmudgeon." Olive Again picks up not long after we left her in the first book, where Olive had just embarked on a relationship with Jack Kennison. Throughout the book, Olive continues to startle us, move us, and inspire moments of transcendent grace. There's a quote from Strout that I think perfectly sums up both this book and the character of Olive. Strout says, quote, "It is not good or bad that interests me as a writer, but the murkiness of human experience and the consistent imperfections of our lives. Olive is certainly imperfect and grouchy and stubborn and sometimes really infuriating, but she is ultimately human, and that's what makes her so fascinating to read about." Strout will be in conversation tonight with Beth Ann Patrick, otherwise known as the Book Maven, who reviews and writes columns for the Washington Post Book World. Her work can be found at NPR Books, LitHub, and Time Magazine, among others, and she has written 2 books for National Geographic, An Uncommon History of Common Things and An Uncommon History of Common Courtesy. And she has edited an anthology titled The Books That Changed My Life. She is currently writing a memoir for Counterpoint Press and is a newly elected board member of the Penn Faulkner Foundation. So please help me welcome to the stage Beth Ann Patrick and Elizabeth Strout.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here on this very windy night. I'm just delighted to be here with Elizabeth Strout, of course. And we're here to talk about the woman we all love to hate, but wind up loving. That, of course, is not Elizabeth herself, but Olive Kitteridge. and I know you've heard a little bit about Olive Again, but it's a book in which Elizabeth Strout returns to Crosby in Shirley Falls, Maine. And you might think nothing much happens in those faraway places, but oh, Godfrey, you're dead wrong. Do things happen? Love and death and desire and hatred and happiness and grief and joy. And those things all happen to Olive, but to others as well in this wonderful collection of stories that really is a novel. Characters from the other novels make an appearance, but our grande dame, Olive Kitteridge, is now in old age, and she's dealing with its vicissitudes in a way that only Olive can. So you'll just wait till you hear her views about Depends undergarments. So first, let's talk about some views from Olive's amanuensis. What's it like escorting her into the world this time around?
Well, she's Olive. I don't really know what to say beyond the fact that she's Olive, and when she shows up, attention must be paid.
Yes, attention must be paid.
So she showed up, and I never expected her to show up again. I wasn't thinking about her at all, and she simply showed up.
And we're going to talk about that specifically because there's a great story behind it. One of the things you said in an interview, probably when Olive Kitteridge first came out, is that you're not interested in good or bad. You're interested in something more complex. Would you elaborate on that a little bit, particularly in terms of Olive, of course?
Right. Well, as a writer, I am interested in the interior lives of ordinary people, mostly. And I'm not interested in good or bad. I'm interested in the complexities that I think most of us live with. And in the character of Olive Kitteridge, her complexities are just a little bit bigger in many ways. And when I write, one of the best parts of writing for me is that I don't judge my characters. And it's so freeing to be able to go to the page and just say, oh, okay, just do what you need to do, folks, and I'm just going to record it. And I love them because I made them up, and they can just be who they are. But I'm not judging them, and I'm not interested in good and bad anyway, because it's a simplification. We're very, very complicated, I think.
I think we are as well, and the characters in Olive again, almost every single, is there one who is just a joy, who's just perfect?
No.
No, I don't think so. Now,
not in my books.
I mentioned Olive and disposable undergarments, and I think her views on the indignities and vagaries of aging are important. Did anything about those surprise you?
Well, the whole thing surprised me, actually. I mean, the whole book surprised me, and everything I wrote, I would have a surprise, which is good, because if I'm not surprised, you won't be. But it was all surprising. And then, but I just followed her through, thinking, okay, this is what Olive is going to do. This is how she's, and then, do you want me to say what she calls the Depends undergarments?
Why not?
Okay. Well, anyway, in the end, she refers to them as her poopy panties. And she's just absolutely furious and disgusted that she has to wear her poopy panties.
But she still gives them a name.
Yeah.
She still uses them.
Yep.
She's our Olive. She's practical.
Yep.
You've talked about...
She gets up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go buy them when nobody else can see her.
I love that. And she winds up doing that for another friend.
And she winds up doing it for another friend along the way when she discovers that this friend is also wearing poopy panties.
There are all kinds of things that bind us together.
Well, really, actually, yes. I mean, there are.
There really are.
Right.
And it can be something as small as a favor like that. It can be a recognition that other people are in the same boat.
Yeah.
The same depends.
Exactly. Exactly.
You have talked many times about your own career not having been sort of a 30 under 30, if you will. You were a lawyer. We'll talk about that again as well. But
no, I wasn't. I went to law school.
You went to law school. That's right. You did have a short time.
6 months.
6 months. And thus, an entire career, an entire education was dismissed. I love it.
Yeah.
But what have you learned about being a creative who is getting older, because that's what we do. Every year we're older.
Right.
What have you learned that helped you give compassion and non-judgment to your characters in this stage of their lives?
I think that, I've been writing since I was very, very small. So I had been writing forever and ever and ever, but I don't think it was probably until my mid-30s that I began to realize that I was judging my characters. So I think at some point before, I'm not sure about time, I'm not good with time, but at some point around 35 to 40ish or so, I began to realize, maybe it was, I don't know, but at some point after having written for years and years and years, I realized, they're not mine. They're who they are. And then I could just really begin to love them. And that's been a very important part for me to learn about my own craft.
That's so important for Olive again, because as you know, and as I'm sure many of you know as well in the audience, people are saying this book is better than Olive Kitteridge. And which is...
I didn't know
they are. I promise. Back me up. Back me up.
Well, whatever. Okay.
And
Sorry.
But I wanted to talk about the Genesis story that you alluded to about Olive again, which is, as some of us know, about some pages you wrote once, and you put them away, and then they turned into part of this book. And then after we talk about that, I'll have you read a little bit from it.
Okay. I think there's a conflation of facts there. I'm not sure, but anyway.
No worries. Correct me.
Or I could just be misremembering. Mm-hmm. But I thought that I was done with Olive, as I said, and then I was in Norway, not Norway, Maine, but the country of Norway for a weekend on my own. I was parked there for the weekend, and I went to a cafe. And honestly, she just showed up. She just showed up in this cafe. I could see her nosing her way into the marina, getting out of that car, now with a cane, so vividly. And I realized I have to get this down. So I did, and sort of sketched out a bit of a story. And then later when I got back, a couple months later, I was in my studio and I realized that I had a folder called Olive Scraps, and that there were pieces of different Olive things that had never made it into the book or whatever. And it was interesting. And then I realized, okay, Olive, here we go.
Here we go.
Here we go again.
Olive, if you would,
okay, so this is from the story or the chapter called The Poet. And this is the first one that I wrote, because like I said, I don't write anything from beginning to end, but this was how she came to me. On a Tuesday morning in the middle of September, Olive Kitteridge drove carefully into the parking lot of the marina. It was early. She drove only in the early hours now, and there were not many cars there, as she had expected there would not be. She nosed her car into a space and got out slowly. She was 82 years old and thought of herself as absolutely ancient. For 3 weeks now, she had been using a cane, and she made her way across the rocky pathway, not glancing up so as to be able to watch her footing, but she could feel the early morning sun and sense the beauty of the leaves that were turned already to a bright red at the tops of the trees. Once inside, she sat at a booth that had a view of the ocean and ordered a muffin and scrambled eggs from the girl with a huge hind end. The girl was not a friendly girl. She hadn't been friendly in the years she'd worked there. Olive stared out at the water. It was low tide, and the seaweed lay like combed rough hair, all in one direction. The boats that remained in the bay sat graciously, their thin masts pointing to the heavens like tiny steeples. Far past them was Eagle Island and also Puckerbrush Island, with the evergreens spread across them both, nothing more than a faint line seen from here. When the girl, who practically slung the plate of eggs and the muffin onto the table, said, hands on her hips, "Anything else?" Olive just gave a tiny shake of her head, and the girl walked away, one haunch of white pants moving up, then coming down as the other haunch moved up and down, huge slabs of hind end. In a patch of sunlight on the table, Olive's rings twinkled on her hand, which sight, lit in such a way, gave her the faintest reverberation of surprise. Wrinkled, puffy, this was her hand. And then minutes later, just as she had put another bite of scrambled egg onto her fork, Olive spotted her, Andrea LaRue. For a moment, Olive couldn't believe it was the girl. Not a girl, she was a middle-aged woman, but at Olive's age, they were all girls. And then she thought, why not? Why wouldn't it be Andrea? The girl, Andrea, sat at a booth by herself. It was a few booths away from Olive, and she faced Olive, but she sat staring out at the water with tinted glasses halfway down her nose. Olive placed her fork on her plate, and after a few moments, she rose slowly and walked up to Andrea's booth and said, "Hello, Andrea. I know who you are." The girl woman turned and stared at her, and for a moment Olive felt she had been mistaken. But then the girl woman took off her tinted glasses, and there she was, Andrea, middle-aged. There was a long moment of silence. It seemed long to Olive, before Olive said, "So, you're famous now." Andrea kept staring at Olive with eyes that were large. Her dark hair was pulled back loosely in a ponytail. Finally she said, "Mrs. Kitteridge?" Her voice was deep, throaty. "It's me," Olive said. "It is I, and I've become an old lady." She sat down across from Andrea. in spite of thinking that she saw in the girl's face a wish not to be disturbed. But Olive was old. She had buried 2 husbands. What did she care? She did not care. You've gotten smaller, Andrea said. Probably. Olive folded her hands on the table, then put them onto her lap. My husband died 4 months ago, and I don't eat as much. I still have an appetite, but I'm not eating as much. And when you get old, you shrink anyway. Andrea said after a moment, You do? Shrink? Of course you do. Your spine gets crunched up, your belly pops out, and down you go. I can't be the first person you've seen get old. You're not, Andrea agreed. Well then, so you know. Bring your plate over, said Andrea, looking past Olive to where Olive had been sitting. Wait, I'll get it for you. And she scooted from her seat and in a moment returned with Olive's plate of eggs and the muffin and also Olive's cane. She was shorter than Olive had thought, childlike almost. Thank you, Olive said. I only started with a cane 3 weeks ago. I had a little car accident is what happened. I was in the parking lot near Chewy's, and I stepped on the gas pedal instead of the brake. Andrea opened her hand slightly and said with a friendly half grimace, That's fair. Not if you're 82 years old. Then everyone seems ready to take away your license. Although I must say the policeman was very nice. I wept. Can you imagine? I still can't believe I did. But I stood there and I wept. Awfully nice man, the policeman. And the ambulance people, they were nice too. Were you hurt? Cracked my sternum. God, Andrea said. It's fine. Olive pulled her jacket closed. I move more slowly, and now I just drive in the early morning. Try to, anyway. I totaled 2 cars in the parking lot that day. 2? 2, that's right. Well, 3 if you count mine. I had to get my friend Edith's husband, Buzzy Stevens, to help me get another car when the insurance check came in. I don't think Buzzy cared much for that, but there we are. No one was hurt, just me. Shook me up, I will say. Well, of course, Andrea said in her deep voice. I saw on Facebook you were just in Oslo, said Olive. She ate some of her egg. You follow me on Facebook? Are you serious? Of course I'm serious. You just had a whole Scandinavian tour doing poetry readings. I went to Oslo with my second husband. I've had 2 husbands, Olive said. And with my second husband, we went to Oslo and took a boat, a cruise, I guess it was, around the fjords. They were beautiful. They were, my word. But then Jack got sad, and then I got sad. And we both said, it's beautiful here, but not as pretty as home. We felt better once we'd figured that out. Olive wiped her nose with a paper napkin that was on the table. She felt as though she was panting. The girl was watching her carefully. I don't know what you thought about the fjords, but that's what we thought, Olive said this and sat back. I never saw the fjords. You never saw the fjords? No. Andrea sat up straight. I gave a reading and hung around with my publisher, and then I had to move on. I wanted to move on. I guess I really don't care about the fjords. Huh, Olive said. I get lonely when I travel, Andrea said. Olive wasn't sure she'd heard this right, but she decided she had, and she thought about it. Well, she said, you probably were always lonely.
What a treat to hear Olive's voice from Liz Strout. That's really amazing. Thank you. One of the things I noticed with these situations, and Olive again, is that Olive is accustomed to being right and to solving things. We all remember her helping Kevin in Olive Kitteridge. But this time, she sometimes gets things spectacularly wrong.
Yeah.
And so people change. The landscape changes. It's all about change. And bear with me for a second. I'm thinking about the Somali population in Shirley Falls, and you wrote about that in the Burgess Boys. And Olive has a caregiver at one point, and Olive again, Halima, who is Somali. And so this change, it's taken. It used to be just a few stores and a few apartment buildings. Shirley Falls now has a sizable population of people that some of the old-timers never expected to be there.
That's right.
And so talk about that change, because I know that that is something you're quite conscious of. Right.
And it's what's happened in Maine. And And Olive is very much on their side. It seemed to me that Olive would be, because Olive feels like an outsider in her own body, in her own life. There's something about her that's never quite, in a way, felt like a part of things. And so it seemed to me that she would be on their side, and she is. And when there's two different home health care workers that come to help her after she's had an illness, and one of them has a bumper sticker of what Olive refers to as that horrible orange-haired president. And she will not be seen in the car. I mean, she can't drive for a couple of weeks.
But she'll let Betty drive her car.
She'll let Betty drive her car with her in it, but she would really, literally rather die than be seen in the truck with that bumper sticker. And then Halima shows up as well, and Betty is not kind to her. And Olive says, "Now you listen to me, Betty Boop." And she said, "We're not going to have any of that in this house." And it's just sort of interesting. But the ending of that story, which I won't give away now, was really what was interesting to me about it.
Well, it is interesting, and I think instead of giving it away, I can segue to something in a different story with your character, Helen, who's married to one of the Burgess boys, and she and her sister-in-law, Margaret, have a very difficult interaction. And I was really interested in something Helen says. Was it an Alaska cruise?
Yes, she had gone on an Alaska cruise with Jim.
And on that cruise, she realizes that the entire crew is Indonesian. And she also realizes, she thinks to herself, oh my gosh, they must all be underneath us in steerage and working so hard. And so she decides that she is going to acknowledge, this one particular steward or whomever he happens to be. And he doesn't respond to her with the, happiness that she thinks he should. And she finally says to Margaret, I just don't think I existed for them on any level. It's perfect because, of course, that can be flipped on its head.
Right.
And so that's the outside world coming in to Shirley Falls as well.
Right. Well, that story is multi-layered because that's just part of what Helen is saying, but the story itself is really about a clash between the New York City culture and the Maine culture, the rural Maine culture. And Helen represents the New York City culture, and Margaret, her sister-in-law, represents the Maine culture. And,
I can't even say that correctly.
So that, doesn't go too well.
It doesn't. And Margaret, who we saw in
the
Burgess Boys, doesn't come off very well.
Right. And this is what I was talking about earlier. There's no good or bad. There's just multifaceted aspects of everybody. And what Bob Burgess, her husband, sees in that story is a part of her that he had not seen before. And, that happens.
It does.
And it doesn't mean that's all of her. It just means there's this one facet of her she doesn't like New York people. And it's a prejudice, as Bob recognizes.
Do you feel torn between Maine and the city?
I like New York people very much. Yes, I do.
There's no conflict.
No, I love.
I mentioned that you practiced for 6 months as an attorney, and you have a wonderful story in Olive again between a lawyer and his client, Bernie and Suzanne.
Bernie.
Right. And I thought, did you use any of your experience in creating that office, that scene, or anything that you know?
Well, I was never the kind of lawyer that Bernie's been around forever. And I mean, again, I love Bernie because I made him and I love him. And he, I think, was a good lawyer.
He's a really wonderful character.
I think so, but, you don't have to, but I'm just saying I do. I like Bernie a lot. But, so my personal legal experiences were not, even close to something of his, but the fact that Suzanne, who's a lawyer, works in the AG's office in child protection, that came to me through my husband, who was an AG and knows AGs. And so I now know a lot more about the AG situation.
Very
and
interesting.
that they have child protection areas and stuff like that. So that was helpful to me.
But speaking of Bernie, I just loved Bernie. Speaking of someone who could come off quite badly but doesn't, let's talk about Jack Kennison.
Right.
Mr. Olive.
Mr. Olive.
He intrigues me.
Oh, yeah. Right.
He has this massive privilege, and he also has massive love for Olive. Did you enjoy writing Jack?
You know, I really did, because again, I'm not invested in making him anything except human. And he's got a number of qualities that are not likable. But what I finally realized about him is that he knows that. He knows that he's got these not likable things. And he actually kind of wishes he wasn't like that. And I thought, that's interesting. He can't help it because he is who he is. But he sort of tries a little bit to help it as he gets older. And then I realized when I wrote the line in Pedicure, which is about the middle of the book, and they're, out for the day, and that Jack is thinking, and he thought to himself, he was marveling about the fact that he ended up married to Olive Kitteridge. He thinks it was that he could be himself with her. And that's when I realized, right, and she can be herself with him. And that's not a small thing. That's quite a gift.
Even though he sometimes says, could you be a little less Olive?
Right. Right. And then, and she'll snap back, and then that will be that.
Right, because he could have come across as a dinosaur. And
I know.
Instead,
I know. And when he rides first class and sticks her in coach because she won't ride first class. And she's up against the bulkhead. And he comes down and says, how are you doing, Missy? I just think I find it very funny.
And then on the way back, and he does buy her the first class ticket.
Right.
I hope we're not spoiling anything. I don't think you can spoil anything with Olive, but she loves being in her little special bed and having.
I know she's completely turned around.
Yes.
She's so excited to be in first class. By the end of the story.
That is Olive out in the great world, but back in Maine, I found a detail in an interview that I thought was fascinating because it illuminated a lot of the scenes in both books for me. And that is, you told an interviewer, if you could have one piece of fine art, it would be like Edward Hopper.
Yeah. And
I thought, that's it. The diner, the kitchen. It's all Hopper. Could you talk about that?
Well, I don't know the first time I saw Hopper. I just can't remember, but I just have always felt such a kinship to his work. And one time I did an event in the Whitney, and they were having a special on Hopper, a couple of different floors of him. And so before the event, they let me go into this empty museum by myself and walk around and see his paint. And I was so excited that I blew it. I was too excited. I just, because every time I go to see Hopper, like there's always 10 million people walking by, and I'm always like, and then I thought, I get to see this. I get to see it. And I just got overly excited, and I didn't enjoy it. I know, it's so sad.
Yeah. But I think
so now I understand. It's only to take a peek around other people's shoulders. That's how to enjoy them.
Maine has that real Hopper cast.
Yes,
it really does,
and Maine does. The sun is very particular.
It is
right.
that very light.
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil. That's so wonderful. But to talk about readers for a moment. What's the most surprising thing you've heard from a reader about Olive?
There was a woman years ago when it came out who lived on my floor from Italy with her husband, and the mother in-law showed up from Italy, and she said to me, when the couple was in their apartment, she said, "You must have a daughter-in-law." And I said, no, I don't. I don't even have a son. And she really, really wanted to let me know that, I mean, I thought maybe she was in there stealing the girls' bras, the young woman's bras, because she was so intensely identified with Olive and that story where Olive steals people's bra. I mean, her daughter-in-law's bra. And that's when I first realized, and ever since then, I've been a little bit surprised how people have said, "Oh, you must have a daughter-in-law." So that's been interesting. You know, there are a lot. I'm just saying there are people out there that really want to be stealing that bra. That's what I've concluded.
I think there are many of us out there who would like to do a lot of the things.
Yes, I think
Olive
that's
gives herself
true.
permission.
Actually, right, I think that's true. Right. So that is sort of the most interesting thing in a way, But well, I liked her, the woman on the hallway.
Hey.
I mean, she was just telling me.
Now, speaking of characters, and another thing that I read is if you could have written one book. I love this question. I ask it all the time, but I already know the answer for Elizabeth Strout. You would have written Anna Karenina.
Yeah.
And
I never could have, but
But you wrote Olive Kitteridge instead. And no. What I'm trying to say.
No. I'm not saying. Right.
Anna Karenina. Of course, one of the things about Tolstoy is the way he gives place to his characters. They're so firmly situated.
That's right.
And of course, that's what we're talking about.
That's right.
Olive and everyone else.
That's
so
right.
Talk to us a little bit more about Tolstoy.
A while ago, and I don't know how long ago, but quite a while ago in my private career, meaning all those years I was writing and nobody knew it, but at some point in there, I realized it's about place and time. So if you have a place and you have time in history and a place and you put a character in there, that's going to become a story. And that will be a very different story than if you put it in a different place or a different time in history. So that's what I figured out on my own.
I can imagine an entire master class about that very thing.
Well, I just figured it out one day.
Now, you gave me a wonderful answer to this question, so I just think I have to share it with all of you. This is a novel. Olive Kitteridge is a novel. They're made up of stories, and there was a trend back several years ago for novel in stories. But this isn't a novel in stories. It's a novel. Does it matter?
I could care less. I just don't care. I don't care what anybody. I don't care if you think it's a novel or stories. I don't care. I just want you to enjoy it if you can.
And
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter to you at all.
It's just
this is how it comes to you.
It's the form that it came out in, and that's all.
So no worrying about making them link, no worrying about spending enough time on this character, none of that.
No,
you're Elizabeth Strout. You can do whatever you want.
Intuitive. It's intuitive. Like I feel, I think about the reader an awful lot. Mm-hmm. An awful lot. And at different stages, there's a different relationship with the reader. And I have an ideal reader, which I make up. Because I figured out a number of years ago, well, if I can make up characters, I can make up an ideal reader.
Who's your ideal reader?
Not going to tell you. No, I'll tell you.
It's me.
No. It's actually, it's funny. It's like my ideal reader is not male, female, or anything in between. But I know that reader, and the reader is somebody who's patient, but not super patient, who would like to receive my work, but I have to be responsible to give it to that person in a way that they then can receive it. So my ideal reader is somebody who's waiting for me to do my job for them. And so I think about that a lot. Why was I talking about this? What were we talking about?
Now I'm just like sitting here. We were talking about why you don't care about how, whether it's stories.
Oh, right. So anyway, so the point, right, and my intuitive. It's intuitive for me how I put together a book. And that's why I don't write from beginning to end, because my mind doesn't seem to work that way. Mm-hmm. So I will do a number of different scenes, and then they will hopefully connect, or if they don't, they get tossed on the floor. But there's an intuitive sense that I have of what character needs to come when, and I don't know it as I'm doing it, but I know that I will know it, kind of.
It's trust yourself.
I do at this point trust myself.
Speaking of this point, and because I know we want to move on to some questions from you all soon, I know everyone will want to hear if you'll write about Olive again.
Oh,
or her community. Are you willing to say?
Well, first of all, I kind of hope not. But I don't know. I mean, honestly, after Olive Kitteridge, I would have truthfully said, I'm not going to write about her again. So I have to truthfully say, I don't know. Because I did write about her again. So I don't know.
That's fair enough. And last, before I turn things over to all of you, what are you working on now? Can you tell us anything about it?
No.
Okay, nothing? That's fine. You are working on something, though.
I would love to tell you about it. I would love to talk about it forever. And I'm not going to. I'm just not going to.
Okay.
Because it's not good for the work.
Totally fair as well.
It has to be furtive.
Now, if no one has any questions, I'll just keep yakking. But we've got this mic, and Brittany is going to bring it around to those of you who do have questions. Thank you so much.
So if you'll just raise your hand if you have a question, and I'll bring you the mic.
So when you were talking about whether or not it was different stories or whether it's a novel, so I read Olive Kitteridge, and then I saw the HBO movie with Frances McDormand, and it all came together so much better for me. And I'm just wondering whether or not the movie and Frances McDormand brought to life the story the way you thought it should be.
Well, I thought they did a wonderful job. I thought they really, really did a wonderful job. It was not my image of Olive in a way, because I think that Frances is pretty, and I'm just saying Olive is Olive, probably much larger than Frances, and I just had a different image, but I thought they did a really good job.
You talk about the fundamentals of a novel, of time and place. And so you said you were in Norway and sitting at a cafe.
Yeah.
Is there a time and a place that's more inspiring or for you to a character to appear?
It doesn't seem to be so. They just will do what they'll come to me almost at any time. Not right now because I'm engaged with you. But, I spend a lot of time alone in my thoughts. As, we joke, I'm in my thoughts. Right? I'm very happily in my thoughts frequently. And they will show up. So they'll show up on the subway or in Norway or, they just, so it doesn't seem like there's any particular place or time for me to be visited by anything.
Well, this goes along a little bit with the same lines of you talked about time and place. I feel like a lot of the characters, maybe more so than in some other books, have names, even really minor characters. And I was just wondering when these characters come to you? Do they have a name, or how do you go about deciding that if you have a name?
Right. You know, names are so interesting, and they're absolutely essential that the character have the right name. And sometimes the character will show up with the right name, as did Olive Kitteridge. She just showed up with Olive Kitteridge. But sometimes the name isn't quite right, and then I have to figure it out. But it's fun. You know, like I will literally go and check out, you know, names, if it's an older woman or if it's not. I mean, like names of kids that were born in 1980, you know, what were the favorite names, and then I'll look down, you know. So, and then I'll find a name that way and try that one on. But they're just really, really important that the names are right. And again, it's intuition when I hit the right name. I just know it, or I feel like I know it. But that's, yeah.
With characters like Olive and some of the more minor characters in that book, and also the British Boys, you know, they come to the reader as fully developed people. How do you develop them, Dawn? Do you go back and forth? Did Olive change between the inception in your mind to putting pen to paper?
Right. It differs with the characters, except. You know, Olive Kitteridge, like I said, she showed up pretty fully formed the first time, and she showed up really, you know, the second time. And there's just something about her oliveness that I didn't have to dust it off to find her. And there are other characters that I will sense that there's something good there for me to work with, but I will need to put them in different scenes and find out a little bit more who they are before I can give them their own story. So it varies. You know, Helen Burgess, I always knew who she was, but I couldn't get her on the page. And then Suzanne Larkin in this story, I knew who she was, but I couldn't get her down, you know, so that took more work. I don't know why. I don't know why, but that's about the answer I think.
Speaking of names, I loved Lucy Barton, and I love Anything is Possible. Did she show up for you as well? How did you come to write Anything is Possible after you wrote Lucy Barton?
I was writing, the truth is that I was writing both of them at the same time. I was writing pieces of Anything is Possible at the same time that I was writing My Name is Lucy Barton. Toward the end of Lucy's, maybe halfway through, I can't remember because, again, I don't do anything from beginning to end, but the point is, halfway through the business of working on her, I began to write Anything is Possible because I found myself interested, you know, in, like I would think, well, what happened to those Pretty Nicely girls? Because I just thought, Pretty Nicely girls, what a thing. It was just so intriguing to me. So I made up a story or two about what it was like to be a Pretty Nicely girl. And then I finished Lucy, and then I concentrated on Anything is Possible. And I almost thought they should be published together, but I didn't want the final page of Lucy's voice to end and then the reader to start with a third-person narration. Because her voice is so particular and it's first person, I just wanted to let it linger on the ear and thought, keep them separate.
So first I would just say...
Wait a minute, where are you? Oh, there you are. Hi.
Hi.
Okay.
Hi. So first I would just say thank you for doing Lucy Barton the way you chose to do it, because I'm not a fast reader, I'm a slow reader. Yeah. I never put that book down.
Oh, I'm
it
so
was
glad.
done.
I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah. So, but that Anything is Possible, to me, that was one of the beautiful things about Olive Kitteridge, too. The way that you can tell stories about other characters
that in the moment you aren't even seeing the connection.
Right.
And yet somehow, can you
Yeah.
talk to us a little bit about the magical way you make those connections?
You know, here's how I envision it. I work at a large table, and I envision a bolt of cloth that's unfolded on it, so that I have, a large piece of unfolded cloth on the table, and I think of these different characters as constellations. Like, I think, okay, there's Pete Barton up there, and there's Tommy there, and then there's Tommy and Pete there. So that's kind of how I envision what I'm doing, because I don't make notes or outlines or anything like that. It's in my head, but in my mind, that's the best way I can explain to you what my mind is sort of seeing. Like, I'll think, okay, this, bingo, we'll have that right over there, and we'll put this one here.
Thank you again for all the characters you have brought to life for us. Your work has gone from the written word to HBO and also to the stage.
Right.
Those are three different creative
They sure are.
What has that been like for you, and what are the distinctions that you've seen across them?
It's just, first of all, it's just weird. Honestly, it's weird because, like, the movie is a movie and it's not a book. And so, and I didn't have a whole lot to do with it. I didn't want to have anything to do with the movie. I don't know anything about movies. But, I talked to Francis and the director, and, we had our talks, and then they just did it. And then with Laura Linney playing My Name is Lucy Barton, I was a little more involved in that. And the adapter to that worked with me to take my words precisely from the book. So that, was interesting for me because Lucy's voice is who she is. And then I went to rehearsals, and that was fascinating. But I don't know what to say about it. It was just so interesting. And I think with Lucy Barton, I felt a little more connected to it. But it's still different. It's an entirely different thing. And to watch it, it was just, I think she's wonderful. But it's so weird. It's weird.
Do you have any schedule and particular place for writing?
Well, I used to be strictly scheduled because I had a daughter who was growing up during all those millions of years that nobody was interested in my work, but that I was still working. And so I would be strict about that. But now, at this point, I prefer to work after I have breakfast because I think that's when I'm sharpest, probably. And then through lunch, because something about having lunch breaks it. And then I might look at it again later in the afternoon or so. But I kind of can, when I'm into it almost all the time in a certain way, so that even if I'm not writing it down, it's going through my head. I'm thinking about it. And then, so where I work, in Maine, I have a studio above the bookstore, which is fantastic. It's my room. Nobody comes in. It's a total mess. I love it. I just love it because it really is messy. And because I'm a very messy worker, I just, keep throwing papers away. And every so often I look around and I think, oh, who cares? It's just mine. Nobody's going to come in here. So that's fun. And I work well there. But I can also work in New York. It doesn't seem to matter where I am as long as I'm not interrupted. I start out with handwriting. And I used to handwrite everything. And now my handwriting is not very good. And so I start out with a handwriting and then we'll move it into the computer faster than I used to.
Again, thank you for all your books. Your voice is very distinctive when you write. It sounds from your description like this maybe happens when you're not writing. Who do you like to read? Or are there people you purposely don't read when you are writing for whatever reason?
No, first of all, it took me so long to figure out how to find my voice and I was writing all the time. And so if I didn't read, I would never have read anything. But, reading is so important. I mean, I think reading is very, very important. As long as you're reading good sentences, then, I have a little thing about that. But anyway, excuse me? Yeah, exactly. So, right. But yes, anyway, so for many years, I was very, affected by the work of Alice Munro for many, many years, and William Trevor. And I think of them as sort of bookends in my life, because she brings such great authority to the page, and he has his own particular style, which is so light and lovely and perfect in its own way. And so anyway, and the Russians, I have loved the Russians, of course, but recently I've been reading biographies, and I've been reading 2 biographies of Tolstoy, because I read the one by Henri Troyat, is that one? And now I'm reading the one by A.N. Wilson. And I like to read more than one biography, because when I read a biography, I'm very much aware that I'm seeing the subject through the biographer's eyes. And I just get nervous, and I think, okay, well, what does it look like through somebody else's eyes? So that's what I've been doing.
So I wanted to ask you about marriage. Marriage is, I think, in Olive Kitteridge, the thing that makes it kind of a novel, because it's the enduring story of Olive and Henry. So why did Olive marry again?
Why did she marry again?
Yes, why did she marry again?
I think because she loved Jack. I think she actually loved Jack. I think he loved her. I think they were both very lonely, and recognized that they could possibly have a chance. And she was scared to death, but she was not stupid, and realized, all right, I'll go with it. And he, so she had a very different kind of marriage with Jack, which was interesting for me to write about, authentically, to try and make it authentic and real. Yeah. Very different marriage. Yeah. Yeah. It was, and Jack was clear to me as a character. And I just realized, they can do this. They can be together. I mean, they have their issues. Whatever. But
we have time for one more question from the audience, and then I'll let Beth Ann have the last word.
I'm really interested in your, you were talking about writing scenes, because as I'm an emerging writer, and there's so much buzz about people, just write it all the way straight through, just get a draft, just get another draft, and I don't write like that. I write in little scenes, and I haven't really come across someone who does that effectively, so I just want to hear more about your process, if you would.
I learned to write in scenes when I was in training, all those years. And I would only have, because my daughter's schedule and stuff, I would only have, and I was teaching, not writing, because I wasn't a writer. I was a writer, but nobody knew it. Anyway. But I was teaching, English in a community college, and I was raising my daughter, whatever. So I only would have a couple of hours, maybe every other day, to work. And that's when I realized, okay, rather than spend 2 hours trying to get Isabel Goodrow out of the A&P, let's just do something that feels connected to me at this moment. And then I figured this out. which is that I think at any given moment, there's always something that a person, it's like a little hook, you know, or it could be a big hook. I mean, it depends, but there's something in us that's a little more urgent about something than something else. And if I could take that emotion that I was feeling at that time that I sat down and change it and transpose it into a character, then that scene would have a heartbeat to it. And that's when I learned to do that. And I understood, okay, this doesn't seem like it makes sense because Isabel Goodrow, you know, she'll stay in the A&P forever. But then I realized, you know what, she didn't even leave her there. Just start another scene. You know, I mean, it was so interesting. I mean, literally, just leave her there and then start another scene, and she's not there. She's out. It was interesting. So you just, you know, so that's when I learned to write, to try to go to the page every day with something that I personally could change into somebody's emotional something. And I just can't do from beginning to end ever. Yes, and then eventually they will connect for me. And that's why I never worry about plot. Ever. I don't even like the word plot. Awful word, really. So don't do it.
Now, at this moment, Isabel is in the dairy aisle, and we'll leave her there. But the rest of you will be lining up, and you should, I think you know this, by your ticket number to have your book signed by Elizabeth Strout. Olive, again, is her new book. I'm just so thrilled to have been here with all of you and with you,
Thank
Elizabeth.
you so much. Thank you very, very much, everybody. Lovely. Thank you. Thank you so